Have you ever felt like the forest was watching you? Not in the way you notice birds in the trees or the occasional deer on the trail, but in a way that makes the hair on your arms rise, your gut twist, and your instincts scream to get out? That's what happened to me one night in the deep woods of northern Washington, and I still don't know how I made it out alive. It started when my cousin Darren invited me on a camping trip. He had always been into backcountry exploring, long hikes, isolated campsites, the kind of stuff that makes most people nervous. But I trusted him. He was experienced and he knew the forest like the back of his hand. We set out on a Friday morning, backpacks loaded with food, tents, and gear. The trail was steep, winding up through thick pine and cedar. By late afternoon, we had left behind the faint sound of cars, the buzzing of cell phones, and every other reminder of civilization. Out there, it was just us, the forest, and an overwhelming silence. "This is it," Darren said, dropping his pack in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. "Nobody comes out here. We'll have total peace." At first it was perfect. We built a fire, cooked some food, and laughed about dumb stories from when we were kids. By nightfall, the stars came out in such numbers that I couldn't stop staring. It felt magical until it didn't. Around midnight, as the fire burned low, I started hearing noises. Heavy, deliberate noises. Not the scurrying of squirrels or the distant cry of an owl. This was different. Something big was moving out there just beyond the ring of firelight. "You hear that?" I whispered. Darren nodded, his expression tightening. "Probably a deer," he said, though his tone wasn't convincing. We listened. The footsteps circled us, slow and heavy. Twigs snapped, branches shifted. The sound wasn't moving away, it was stalking. Finally, Darren grabbed the flashlight and aimed it into the trees. For a split second I thought I saw something massive, standing between the trunks. But when the beam hit it, it was gone. "Must have been a shadow," Darren muttered. I wanted to believe him, but my heart was hammering too hard. That wasn't a shadow. Whatever I saw had to be at least 8 feet tall, with shoulders wider than any man I'd ever met. We tried to shake it off and went into the tent, but sleep didn't come easy. Every time I started drifting off, another sound would jolt me awake. The crunch of footsteps, the low groan of wood bending under something's weight, even a strange guttural noise that made my stomach twist. At some point I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was Darren shaking me awake. "Listen," he whispered. I held my breath. That's when I heard it. A howl. Not a wolf, not a coyote, something deeper, rawer, almost human but stretched into a monstrous tone. It echoed through the forest, and with it came a sudden stench, a foul odor of rot and wet fur that seeped into the tent. Darren's face had gone pale. "That's not an animal I know," he said. Neither of us spoke after that. We just sat there in silence, clutching the hunting knives we'd brought, waiting for whatever was out there to show itself. And it did. Around 3 a.m. we heard the footsteps again, only this time they were right outside the tent. The ground shook with each thud. I could see the shadow of something enormous moving across the thin fabric, blotting out the faint moonlight. Then came the sound of heavy breathing, deep, ragged, animalistic. I thought I was going to pass out from fear. Darren slowly reached for the zipper of the tent, but before he could open it, a massive hand pressed against the side, right where my head was. The fabric bulged inward and I froze. The hand was huge, far larger than any human's, with long, thick fingers and rough, matted hair. For several seconds, it just stayed there, pressing against the tent as if testing us before pulling away. We didn't move, didn't breathe. The thing circled the tent for what felt like forever, then finally walked off, its footsteps fading into the distance. When the sun finally rose, we packed our things in silence. Neither of us said a word about what happened, but both of us knew we had to get out. As we hiked back down the trail, I noticed something strange. In the dirt, pressed deep into the ground, were footprints. They were massive, easily twice the size of my boot, with clear impressions of toes. Darren saw them too, but he didn't speak. He just picked up the pace, his eyes darting nervously toward the trees. We made it back to civilization by afternoon, exhausted and shaken. Later, when I told a local about what we'd experienced, he just gave me a knowing look. "People see things out there," he said quietly. "Big things. You're lucky you came back." Even now, years later, I can still hear that howl in my head. I can still smell that awful stench, and I can still feel the pressure of that enormous hand against the tent wall. Some people say Bigfoot is just a myth. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I will never set foot in those woods again. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more terrifying encounters. They say the forest can play tricks on your mind. Shadows moving where they shouldn't, branches snapping from the wind, distant howls that turn out to be nothing more than coyotes. But what my uncle and I went through one winter up in Montana wasn't a trick. It wasn't our imagination. And if I live to be 100, I'll never forget the night Bigfoot found us. It was the winter of 2017, and I had just graduated college. My Uncle Ray owned a remote hunting cabin deep in the mountains, miles from the nearest town. He invited me to spend a week there, away from the noise of everyday life. At the time I thought it sounded perfect. Snow, isolation, a chance to breathe. The cabin itself was small but sturdy, made of dark logs with a heavy iron stove in the center. It sat at the edge of a frozen creek, surrounded by towering pines that groaned under the weight of snow. Getting there required a long drive up icy dirt roads, followed by a half-hour hike through knee-deep powder. Once we settled in, though, it felt almost cozy, like our own little fortress against the wilderness. For the first couple of days, everything was fine. We split wood, drank hot coffee, and played cards by lantern light. The nights were quiet, except for the occasional crackle of ice breaking on the creek. But on the third night, everything changed. I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sound that didn't belong. At first I thought it was the wind, but then I realized it was footsteps, slow, heavy, crunching in the snow outside the cabin. "Uncle Ray," I whispered, shaking him awake. He listened for a moment, then nodded grimly. "Stay quiet." The footsteps circled the cabin. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They were deliberate, too steady to be an animal scavenging. Whatever it was huge. The sound carried a weight to it, each step vibrating faintly through the wooden floor. Ray reached for the rifle he kept propped by the door, but he didn't open it. Instead, we just sat in silence, listening as the steps paused right outside the window. I forced myself to look. Through the frost on the glass, I could make out a shape, tall, broad, and impossibly large. Its outline blocked the moonlight, and for a brief second, I caught the reflection of eyes glowing faintly back at me. Then just as suddenly it moved on. The steps faded into the trees. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning we went outside to check the snow. What we found made my stomach drop. Footprints, massive, human-like, but far too big to belong to any person. They circled the cabin just as we had heard, and then disappeared into the tree line. Each print was at least 18 inches long, pressed deep into the frozen ground. Ray knelt by one of them, his jaw tight. "That's not a bear," he muttered. The rest of the day we stayed close to the cabin. Every snap of a branch or flutter of wind had me on edge. By sunset I was begging Ray to pack up and leave, but he shook his head. "Too late in the day. We'll go tomorrow." I didn't argue, but deep down I knew it wouldn't wait that long. That night the thing came back. This time it didn't just circle the cabin, it tested it. Around midnight, the doorknob rattled violently, as if someone was trying to force their way inside. Then came heavy thuds against the walls, shaking the shelves and rattling the lanterns. The cabin groaned under the pressure, and I swear I saw dust fall from the rafters. Ray shouted and fired a shot out the window. The gunshot echoed through the forest, but whatever was out there didn't run. Instead, it let out a sound that froze my blood. A roar. Deep, guttural, and furious. It wasn't like any animal I'd ever heard. It was almost human, but distorted, like the voice of something that shouldn't exist. The cabin shook again as it slammed against the wall, and I thought for sure it was going to come crashing down. But after what felt like an eternity, the noise stopped. The forest went silent. We sat awake until dawn, clutching the rifle, waiting for it to return. But it never did. When the first light of morning spilled across the snow, we stepped outside. The ground around the cabin was a mess of prints, dozens of them circling and pacing, some pressed right up against the walls. One in particular stood out. It was a handprint, smeared across the frosted window pane. Enormous, with long fingers and nails that scratched faint grooves into the glass. That was enough for Ray. We packed up immediately, not even bothering to clean the place. As we hiked back through the snow, I felt eyes on us the entire time. Every crunch of our boots seemed to echo louder than it should, and every shadow between the trees looked like it was about to move. When we finally reached the truck, Ray didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring back at the woods. "You know what that was?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yeah. But you won't catch me saying it out loud. We never went back to that cabin. In fact, Ray ended up selling the property a year later. But I still think about it. I think about the way it circled us like prey. The way it tested the cabin as if deciding whether to tear it apart. The way it roared when we fought back. Most of all, I think about the handprint on the window, the silent promise that whatever it was it wanted in. And someday if someone else dares to spend the night in that cabin, I fear it just might succeed. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more terrifying encounters. Some people go missing in the woods and are never found. The official reports blame accidents, falls, exposure, wild animals. But sometimes the truth is darker. Sometimes the forest takes people in ways we can't explain. I learned that the hard way during a hunting trip in Oregon, when I came face to face with something I wish I could forget. It was late October, the peak of hunting season. My friend Tyler and I had been planning the trip for months, eager to track deer in the dense backcountry. We packed light, carrying only rifles, tents, and enough food to last a few days. The first day was uneventful. We hiked deep into the forest, following game trails along steep ridges and into valleys blanketed in fog. By sunset, we set up camp in a clearing not far from a river. The air was sharp with the smell of pine and damp earth, and as night fell, the forest grew unnervingly still. I remember Tyler saying, "Feels too quiet out here. Like the woods are holding their breath." At the time I laughed it off. But I wouldn't be laughing for long. On the second day just after dawn, we split up to cover more ground. Tyler went north while I followed a ridge south. We agreed to meet back at camp by noon. I didn't see much, just a few rabbit tracks and the distant rustle of something moving through the underbrush. By midday I headed back, expecting to find Tyler already at camp. But when I arrived, the clearing was empty. His pack was still there, along with his half-empty water bottle, but there was no sign of him. Hours passed and my worry grew. I fired a shot into the air, our signal in case one of us got lost. No answer. I shouted his name until my throat was raw. Still nothing. By nightfall, panic had set in. I should have hiked out and called for help, but something in my gut told me Tyler wasn't just lost. Something else had happened. That night as I sat by the fire, I heard it for the first time. A howl, low, guttural, and drawn out, echoing across the forest. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a coyote. It was something larger, something heavier. The sound rattled my chest and left me frozen in place. Then from somewhere in the darkness I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, heavy enough to snap branches with every step. I grabbed my rifle and aimed toward the trees, but I saw nothing. Just shadows shifting between the trunks. The footsteps circled me closer and closer, until I swore I could feel the ground tremble. Then it stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I stayed awake until dawn, gripping the rifle, eyes darting at every flicker of movement. The next morning I found tracks. They were massive, at least twice the size of my boot, leading away from camp. And there, pressed into the mud by the riverbank, was something that made my blood run cold. A rifle. Tyler's rifle. Snapped clean in half. The prints around it told a story, drag marks as if he'd been pulled. The stride was enormous, far too long for a human. I followed the trail for half a mile, until the forest grew so dense and silent that my courage broke. I turned back, shaking, sick with fear. That night I didn't sleep. The footsteps came again, circling closer than before. Once, I swear I saw a figure standing between the trees, tall, impossibly broad, its outline darker than the night around it. Then came the smell. Rotten meat. Wet fur. A stench so powerful it made my stomach turn. It drifted through camp like a warning, and with it came the sound of breathing, deep, animalistic, just beyond the firelight. I didn't move. I didn't dare. The thing stayed there for hours, watching. I never saw its face, but I felt its presence. Massive, intelligent, patient. It could have killed me if it wanted to. But it didn't. It just waited as though daring me to follow. By morning, the tracks were back, circling camp like a predator toying with prey. Tyler was gone, and I knew if I stayed, I'd be next. I hiked out that day, moving as fast as my legs could carry me, never once looking back. Every sound in the forest had me on edge, every shadow a threat. When I finally stumbled onto the logging road and flagged down a truck, I nearly collapsed from exhaustion. Search and rescue teams combed the area for weeks. They found nothing. No Tyler, no body, no more tracks. Just empty forest. To this day, his disappearance is listed as unresolved. But I know the truth. I know what I heard circling my camp. I know what I smelled in the night. I know what I saw standing between the trees. And I know Tyler didn't just get lost. Something took him. The forest holds its secrets well, but sometimes if you listen closely, it tells you the truth. And the truth is, Bigfoot isn't just a story. It's out there. It's watching. And sometimes, it decides who gets to leave the forest, and who doesn't. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more terrifying encounters.